I'm Siobhán Antoniou, and I'm the Minister of the North Downs Surrey Pastorate. It involves serving 4 churches that make up our pastorate, and those are Banstead and Dorking, Redhill and Reigate Park Church. And what it involves changes every day. It's a really varied role. So it might be meeting with elders, leading worship, perhaps visiting a family to help them to plan for a funeral or planning a funeral. It might be popping past Messy Church or the toddler group, or visiting somebody who's not very well in hospital. Sometimes it's preparing a course like our Advent course or a Bible study. Every day looks completely different, and that's what makes it such a fulfilling role to be a pastorate minister. My first impressions of the churches are that each of the churches that make up the pastorate are all unique, all have their own history and their own character and their own way of doing things, but share core values. All of the churches are very welcoming, are very open to new people who come and join us. I notice that each of the 4 churches in the pastorate have really strong connections to the community as well, whether that is the toddler group or coffee club or book club or supporting local charities like the food bank. We are very connected to the places where we live across the pastorates, and that's a really special thing to be part of. One of my first impressions of the churches is the strength of the eldership in each of the 4 churches. So while I am the one pastorate minister of the North Downs Surrey Pastorate, I'm never on my own being minister, because I serve alongside elders, I serve alongside other church leaders like Sue Knight, our local church leader at Reigate Park, and so there's definitely a sense of being within a team, within a pastorate, which is important. I always imagined being a minister from when I was really little. I grew up in the Methodist church, and I went off and I studied theology and history. And then after that, my first job out of university was working in a residential community with adults who had learning disabilities. I worked for the Quakers in a homeless shelter for a few years, and then I worked for Christian Aid, and then I went off into my training. But every kind of step was another journey towards ministry. Christian Aid for 7 years, and I was able to see what the global church looks like. And I hope I'd never forget that sense that we are part of a big world of Christians, that every day we follow Jesus alongside millions of other people in the world. But then when I was at Christian Aid, after a while I started getting itchy feet, and that I kept getting up from my desk and walking around my office. I didn't have anywhere to go. It was just almost like my feet were telling me that it was time to move on. And at the same time, my church, and where I was a member in Oxford, had gone into vacancy. And so I started leading worship more often, and we had an LGBT group that met once a month, and so I did a little bit of training so that I could preside at communion for that group. And those experiences of leading communion for the first time and leading worship more often, and the fact that I kept getting up out of my chair and wandering around my office like I had somewhere to go but I wasn't sure where I was going, made me realise that it was a time to really seriously consider candidating. So that's when I went and said to my church meeting, I think I'm called to be a minister, what do you think? And started that journey of having that calling tested and affirmed. And then I went off to start my training at Northern College in 2020. I finished in summer of 2024, and then I was inducted as Minister of the North Downs Surrey Pastorate in September. I think that when you come to church, you can expect to be welcomed and to be invited in to take part. You can expect to be welcomed if you arrive having never been to church before. And you can expect to be welcomed if you're a family as well. I have a young child, so I understand that it can be difficult in worship with young children, and it's something I feel very passionately about. So at Reigate Park we have activity bags that children can use and empty and rummage through and stay busy and active while taking part in worship, and then they will be invited to go out to junior church if they would like to, which is a very vibrant community that children have together, and then come back. We'll always sing together, and sometimes we will sing old traditional hymns that we love, and sometimes we will sing new songs that we've learnt together. We'll always pray together. We'll pray for people who are lonely or feeling poorly that week. We'll pray for places in the world where there's conflict. We'll pray for people that don't have a safe place to call home. And we'll also pray for creation. So care for the environment is such an important part of our faith, and we really feel that here at Reigate Park because we can look around our worship space and see the trees around us. So at some point in worship we'll also always pray for this environment that God has given us, and we will always read scripture together. So we'll get out those ancient words of the Bible, and sometimes there'll be stories and sometimes there'll be poems. There's lots of different types of writing in the Bible, and we'll read it together and we'll think about what it means for us. And that might be through a sermon, or it might be through discussion questions. Sometimes we might have a sketch, there's lots of different ways in which we might explore scripture, but we'll always explore scripture together. It's a real privilege as a worship leader to be able to reflect, to spend the week reflecting on scripture, try and kind of find something that sticks out for me, that comes alive. And then I will think about the conversations that I've had in the week or what's happening in the life of the church and see if there is a connection that is drawn. I'll also look at commentaries, because lots of the Bible can be lost in translation. They're really ancient scriptures that are written in different languages and then translated and edited and translated and lost and found, and then we inherit them. And yet there is God in them, there is truth in them, and they always spark something every week that feels really meaningful to us. But importantly, I think that preaching is not just a single person's job. It's a conversation between me as a worship leader and my faith and my connection to God, but also us as a community, which is why I always like to have a moment in worship where I can say, oh, what do you think? Because actually God speaks to all of us. We all have a direct relationship with God, and we can all hear meaning from the scripture directly. So there is also a communal aspect of understanding the scripture that we do together when we gather for worship, and then we go out into our weeks to live out our lives as Christians. People can expect to be welcomed, to be affirmed, to be invited into church life, and also to be encouraged to find our gifts and our skills, because every member of our church community contributes something important just by being the person God made them to be.